Hello, Reddit. I'm Emma. I am 29 years old, married to my amazing husband, Nate, and we have a 6-month-old daughter, Lily. Life was supposed to be perfect after Lily was born, but instead, everything changed in ways I could never have imagined. All because of my stepmother, Claire. To give you some background, Claire married my father-in-law, Richard, about 5 years ago. She's in her mid-50s and was never able to have children of her own, something she's always been open about. At first, I felt sorry for her. I understood how painful that must have been. But after Lily was born, her behavior crossed the line from overly involved to something that still makes my skin crawl. It all started the first time Claire came to visit after Lily was born. She showed up with bags of baby clothes, toys, and blankets, some of which were handmade. I thought it was sweet until she started referring to Lily as my baby and my little girl every time she held her. I tried to brush it off, but the way she clung to Lily and whispered things like, "You're the daughter I always wanted," set off alarms in my head. Nate and I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. We figured she was just excited to have a baby in the family. But as the weeks went by, her behavior became increasingly possessive. She would show up unannounced, letting herself in with the spare key Richard had given her. More than once, I walked into the nursery to find her standing over Lily's crib, murmuring prayers and stroking her hair. The final straw came one night when I woke up to the sound of whispering through the baby monitor. My heart pounded as I crept down the hall and peeked into the nursery. There, in the dim glow of the nightlight, was Claire, kneeling beside the crib with her hands clasped, eyes closed in prayer. "Claire!" My voice came out sharper than I intended. She jumped, her eyes flying open as she scrambled to her feet. "Oh, am I? I was just saying a prayer for Lily, for her health and happiness." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I appreciate the thought, but it's late. You shouldn't be here without letting us know." "I couldn't sleep," she said, her voice trembling. "I just needed to see her. She's like the daughter I never had." "Claire," I said firmly, stepping between her and the crib. "Lily is my daughter. I need you to respect our space and our boundaries." Her face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. "But I love her like she's my own. I know you care about her," I said gently, though my pulse was racing. "But this isn't healthy. We need some space." Claire burst into tears, covering her face with her hands as she stumbled out of the room. Nate appeared in the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "What's going on?" he asked. "I found Claire in Lily's room again," I said, my voice shaking. Nate's expression darkened, and he immediately went after her. I heard their hushed voices in the living room, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. When Nate returned, he looked exhausted. "She's gone," he said. "I told her she needs to respect our boundaries, or she won't be welcome here anymore." I nodded, hoping that would be the end of it. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. For a few days, things seemed to calm down. Claire stopped showing up unannounced, and I started to relax, thinking maybe she'd finally understood. But then the text messages started. "Claire, please let me see Lily. I miss her so much. Claire, I know I overstepped, but I can't help how I feel. Please don't keep her from me. Claire, I just want to hold her again. I need her." At first, I ignored the messages, hoping she'd get the hint. But they kept coming, long, emotional paragraphs about how Lily had filled the hole in her heart, how she couldn't bear to be away from her. The desperation in her words was unsettling. Nate tried to talk to his dad about it, but Richard brushed it off as just a phase. "She's always wanted children," he said. "Having Lily around brings her joy. Can't you cut her some slack?" "She's crossing the line," Nate argued. "She showed up in Lily's room in the middle of the night." "That's not normal, Dad." Richard sighed, but didn't seem to grasp the seriousness of the situation. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Sunday afternoon. Nate had taken Lily to the park while I stayed home to catch up on laundry. I was folding clothes in the bedroom when I heard the faint creak of the front door. "Nate?" I called out, assuming they'd come home early. No response. A chill ran down my spine as I stepped into the hallway, my pulse quickening. I moved cautiously toward the living room and froze. Claire stood in the doorway, her eyes red and puffy, clutching one of Lily's stuffed animals to her chest. "Claire!" My voice came out sharper than I intended. "How did you?" I still have a spare key, she whispered. My heart pounded as I took a step forward. You can't be here. You need to leave. Now. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the stuffed animal tighter. I just wanted to see her. I needed to hold her again. Please, Emma, don't take her away from me. She's not yours to take. I snapped, my fear giving way to anger. This isn't normal, Claire. You need help, but you can't come into my home like this. Her breath hitched, and she shook her head frantically. I can't live without her. I can't. If I can't see her, I don't want to live anymore. The air seemed to freeze around me. My pulse pounded in my ears as adrenaline surged through my veins. Claire, listen to me, I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could. You need to leave. Right now. If you don't, I'm calling the police. No, please, don't do that, she cried, taking a step toward me. Leave. Now, I shouted, my voice shaking. Claire let out a sob, dropping the stuffed animal as she stumbled back toward the door. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes wild with desperation. I just wanted to love her, she whispered. And then she was gone, the front door slamming behind her. I locked the door and immediately called Nate, my hands trembling as I told him what had happened. He rushed home with Lily, and we called the police to report the break-in. Claire was issued a formal warning and ordered to stay away from our home. We changed the locks that night and installed a security system the next day. For a while, I couldn't sleep without checking the baby monitor every hour, terrified that Claire might come back. But as weeks passed with no further incidents, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, it was finally over. Then, late one night, my phone buzzed with a new text message. My breath caught in my throat as I read the words. Claire, I'm sorry for everything. I know I crossed the line. I just wanted to feel like a mother. I'll leave you alone now. I promise. Part of me wanted to believe her. But another part, the part that still remembered the sound of her whispering over Lily's crib, knew better than to let my guard down. Because some boundaries, once crossed, can never be undone. After Claire broke into our home, everything changed. We installed new locks, added security cameras, and made sure the windows were always locked. But no amount of security could ease the anxiety that settled deep in my chest. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside the window sent my pulse racing. I couldn't shake the fear that Claire might come back. Nate tried to reassure me. She got the message, he said. The police warning scared her. She won't try anything again. I wanted to believe him, but something told me this wasn't over. For a few weeks, there was silence. No more texts, no unexpected visits. I started to relax, thinking maybe Claire had finally accepted the boundaries we'd set. Then the phone call started. At first, they came late at night, silent calls with no one speaking on the other end. I'd answer, hear faint breathing, and then the line would go dead. It happened once, then twice, then almost every night. I tried blocking the number, but the calls kept coming from different ones. Nate wanted to go back to the police, but without proof that it was Claire, there wasn't much they could do. She's testing us, I said one night after another silent call, waiting to see if we'll break. I won't let her near you or Lily, Nate promised, pulling me in his arms. But even as he held me, I could feel the tension in his shoulders, the fear he didn't want to show. Things escalated 2 weeks later. It was a Saturday night, and we just put Lily to bed. Nate was in the living room watching TV while I finished folding laundry. The house was quiet, the baby monitor faintly crackling beside me. Then, through the monitor, I heard something that made my blood turn to ice. A faint creak of floorboards, the soft rustle of fabric. Someone was in Lily's room. Lily, I called, my voice trembling as I rushed down the hall. The door to her room was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and froze. Claire stood beside the crib, her hands gently brushing Lily's hair as she whispered softly to herself. No, 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 no. I gasped, my heart slamming against my ribs. Get away from her. Claire turned, her eyes wild with emotion. I just needed to see her, she said, her voice trembling. She needs me. She's my little girl. She's not your daughter, I shouted, stepping between her and the crib. You have to leave. Now, please, Emma. I love her, Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand what it's like to want a child so badly and never have one. Lily fills that hole in my heart. Get out of my house before I call the police. I yelled. Claire's face crumpled in anguish, but I didn't care. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Please, don't do this, she sobbed. I can't lose her. I can't. Leave now, I screamed, pointing toward the door. Footsteps pounded down the hallway as Nate rushed in. His eyes widened in shock when he saw Claire. What the hell are you doing here? He shouted, stepping between her and the crib. I just wanted to hold her, Claire cried. You broke into our home again. I shouted, my hands shaking as I held my phone. The police are on their way. Claire let out a choked sob, her eyes darting wildly between us. I can't live without her. If I can't see her, I don't want to live. Stop, Nate shouted, holding up his hands. Don't say that. You need help, Claire, but you can't keep doing this. I don't need help, she screamed, clutching her head. I need Lily. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder with each second. Claire's eyes widened in panic. No, please don't let them take me. I didn't mean to scare you. I just needed to hold her. Please don't let them take me away. She backed toward the window, her chest heaving with sobs. Claire, please, calm down, Nate said, his voice shaking. Nobody wants you to get hurt. But before he could finish, the front door burst open, and 2 police officers rushed inside. Back away from the window, one officer shouted, hand hovering near his holster. Claire froze, her breath hitching as she raised her hands. Please, don't hurt me. I just wanted to see her. The officers moved quickly, securing Claire's hand behind her back as she sobbed uncontrollably. I didn't mean to scare them, she cried as they led her down the hallway. I just wanted to love her. I just wanted to hold her. Her voice faded as they took her outside, the front door swinging shut with a final, hollow thud. For a long moment, the house was silent except for the faint hum of the baby monitor. I stood beside Lily's crib, my knees shaking so badly I had to grip the railing to stay upright. Is she okay? Nate asked, his voice hoarse. I glanced down at Lily. She was still sound asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. She's fine, I whispered, my voice breaking. She's okay. Nate wrapped his arms around me, holding me tightly as the adrenaline slowly drained from my body. My heart still pounded in my chest, but for the first time in weeks, I let myself believe that the worst was over. The next few days were a blur of police reports and phone calls. Claire was charged with trespassing, breaking and entering, and harassment. She was placed in a psychiatric facility for evaluation, and a restraining order was issued, legally barring her from contacting us or coming near our home. Richard, devastated by what had happened, tried to apologize, but the damage was done. Nate and I made it clear that until Claire received the help she needed, she would never be allowed near our family again. I never thought it would go this far, Richard said, his voice heavy with guilt. I should have stopped her sooner. I know you loved her, Nate replied, but we have to protect our family now. Richard nodded, tears welling in his eyes as he hugged Nate tightly. For the first time in months, our home felt safe again. But even as life began to return to normal, I couldn't shake the memory of Claire standing beside Lily's crib, the desperation in her eyes, the heartbreak in her voice. I wanted to feel compassion for her. I wanted to believe she hadn't meant to hurt us. But some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. And I knew, deep down, that this wasn't the end of the story. Because some wounds don't heal with time. Some wounds leave scars that never fade. The days following Claire's arrest were a haze of police reports, phone calls, and restless nights. Even though she was no longer a threat, the fear lingered like a shadow over our home. I found myself double-checking the locks every night, jumping at the slightest sound. Sleep was a luxury I could no longer afford. Not when every creak of the floorboards sent my heart racing. Nate did his best to reassure me, but I could see the strain wearing on him too. He'd always been the calm, steady one, the rock I could lean on. But this ordeal had shaken him in ways neither of us wanted to admit. And Lily, sweet, innocent Lily, had no idea how close she'd come to danger. I swore to myself that I would never let anyone threaten my family again. A week later, we received news that Claire had been released from the psychiatric facility. She'd been diagnosed with a severe anxiety disorder compounded by unresolved grief from her infertility. The doctors believed she wasn't a danger to others, only to herself, and she was placed on strict medication with mandatory therapy sessions. But the restraining order remained in place. "She won't come near us again," Nate assured me after we got the call. The court made that clear. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something inside me wouldn't rest. Claire's obsession had gone too far for me to trust that a few therapy sessions would fix everything. I still slept with the baby monitor clutched in my hand, listening to Lily's soft breathing as if it were the only thing tethering me to sanity. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, life began to return to normal. Nate went back to work, and I settled into a routine with Lily. Morning walks in the park, afternoons filled with laughter and playtime, and quiet evenings rocking her to sleep. For the first time in months, our home felt like a place of peace again. Until the night, I woke to the sound of glass shattering. The noise jolted me upright, my heart pounding as adrenaline surged through my veins. I grabbed my phone and bolted out of bed, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. "Nate," I whispered urgently, shaking his shoulder. He sat up instantly, his eyes wide with alarm. "What was that? Someone's in the house?" I gasped. Without hesitation, Nate grabbed the baseball bat he kept beside the bed and crept toward the bedroom door. I scooped Lily out of her crib, holding her close as I followed behind him, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone. As we reached the hallway, the sound of footsteps echoed from downstairs, slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly familiar. Nate held up a hand, signaling me to stay back. I clutched Lily tightly, her warm breath against my neck the only thing grounding me as fear threatened to consume me. Then I heard her voice. "Lily, Mommy's here. Don't be scared, baby girl." My blood turned to ice. It was Claire. "Claire!" Nate shouted, gripping the bat tighter. "Get out of my house. Now, I just need to see her." Claire sobbed from somewhere below. "Please, just let me hold her one more time. I promise I won't take her away. I just need to feel her in my arms." I clutched Lily tighter, my breath coming in ragged gasps as tears burned my eyes. "Call the police," I whispered urgently to Nate. He nodded and pulled out his phone, keeping his eyes locked on the staircase. His fingers fumbled with the screen as the sound of Claire's footsteps grew louder. "Don't call them," Claire screamed. "Please, I don't want to hurt anyone. I can't live without her." "You need help, Claire," Nate shouted. "But this isn't the way." "Don't take her from me," she sobbed, her voice breaking with desperation. "She's the daughter I was meant to have." I backed into Lily's room, my pulse thundering in my ears as I locked the door and pressed my back against it. Lily stirred in my arms, sensing my fear, but I rocked her gently, whispering soft reassurances as tears streamed down my face. "It's gonna be okay, baby," I whispered. "Mommy's here. Mommy's got you." Downstairs, I heard Nate's voice rising in panic as Claire's sobs grew louder. The sound of furniture scraping against the floor, followed by a loud crash, made me jump. And then, silence. The air was thick with tension as I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear what was happening. My fingers gripped my phone so tightly it hurt, but I couldn't bring myself to call 911. Not yet. Then Nate's voice cut through the silence. "Claire, please, just sit down. The police are on their way. No one has to get hurt." "No," she screamed. "You don't understand. I don't want to live without her. I can't." "Stop," Nate shouted. "Don't." A loud thud echoed through the house, followed by the sound of something shattering. My breath caught in my throat as I clutched Lily tighter, tears streaming down my cheeks as I whispered frantic prayers under my breath. And then, footsteps pounded up the stairs. I pressed my back against the door, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. "Emma." Nate's voice called from the hallway. "It's me. Open the door." I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the knob. When the door finally swung open, Nate stood there, his face pale and his eyes wide with shock. "She's gone," he said, his voice hoarse. I managed to stop her. She tried to. His voice broke, and he took a deep, shuddering breath. The police are on their way. I collapsed into his arms, sobbing as relief and fear collided in my chest. Lily whimpered softly between us, sensing the tension, but too young to understand what had happened. The police arrived within minutes, their flashing lights painting the walls in harsh red and blue. They found Claire outside, sobbing uncontrollably on the front lawn. She was taken into custody without resistance, her cries echoing through the night as they placed her in the back of the squad car. This time, there would be no second chances. Claire was charged with breaking and entering, harassment, and violating the restraining order. Given her history and the severity of her actions, she was sentenced to a psychiatric facility with no chance of early release. Richard, devastated by what had happened, tried to reach out to us, but Nate and I knew we needed to cut ties for our family's safety. As much as it hurt, we couldn't risk Claire finding a way back into our lives. In the months that followed, the fear began to fade. The locks were changed again, the security cameras upgraded, and I slowly learned to sleep without the constant hum of anxiety in my chest. But some scars never fully heal. Even now, years later, I still find myself checking the baby monitor more often than necessary, listening to the soft sound of Lily's breathing just to reassure myself that she's safe. I've learned to forgive myself for the fear that still lingers, the nightmares that sometimes wake me in the dead of night, leaving me breathless and shaking. Because in the end, we survived. We protected our family, and no one will ever take that from us again.